Something that I haven't really seen taught that often is how to hide your lighting on set. This is actually quite a crucial skill to have because having lights everywhere is sometimes unavoidable and it gets you the best shot. There's a few drawbacks sometimes of just having tons of grip gear on set, especially for documentary. For one, this is just not how life is. We're not used to just seeing lights around, and if you're working with real people, it can be intimidating. But also, they can get in your shot and limit the style of your shooting. And so I'm gonna break down a few different ways of how you can have lighting in your shot and get cinematic footage without ever having to actually have a footprint on set of that lighting gear. I'll talk about the gear in a sec, but I want to break down those 4 ways you can hide your lights right away. The first is just in plain sight with practical. The second is through windows and coming from outside of the building. The third is using overhead things like polecats and suction cups. And the last one is having someone, what we call Hollywooding or hand bombing a light right near your camera and following you along the shot. And actually this technique you will see on huge Hollywood sets all the way up to projects like Wes Anderson's films. There's often a person running around with a China bulb right beside their camera. So one of the goals of today was to see if we can light without seeing the lights, trying to do as much of a 360 approach. Always for my documentary work, the less lights I can have on set that are seen, to me, feels more real, and I always believe I'll get a better performance out of people who are non-actors when there is less lighting on set. So first, let's talk about the overhead lighting. We used a device called a polecat, and this actually pushes into the sides of your walls, and you're able to get your light above your subject, and sometimes pretty big lights, like this Nanlite Pavo Slim 360C. It's actually quite the big light, and using a pretty small polecat, we were able to push that in. You'll hear some people also calling these auto poles as well that go in there. I think there's just different companies or different terminology for them. There's just a few drawbacks about them. For one, I'm always kind of sketched out by them. They always feel like they might just fall. Not because they actually seem to be doing that, but the longer the pole you get, the more it bows, and it just seems to be defying gravity. But there's a few things you can do to help mitigate that. Incredible Grip, who was also acting as our gaffer that day, Gabe, puts a little bit of tape around them just to help the actual padding to not slide down. It's just a little extra catch. And the drawback too is you do need the width of your room or the width of the space that you're pushing up against to be somewhat narrow. Now, I've used polecats for a long time. If you remember that one shot I did in Battleground for the dinner table scene, I kind of cheated. I put it into a cabinet and on top of our pull-up bar in our office, but I was able to hang the light above. It allows you to get lights above your subject without having to use huge 750 combo stands and big long boom poles over top. What I really love about using auto poles and polecats is you're able to create that pool of light in a bigger space. And why I like that then is you're able to do 360 shots. You can see Nick and I working around here with Elisha with having that light there, that Pavlosim 360C on that slight angle. We threw a grid on there too, just to give it some more directional light and take away the spill. But I like lighting from above when I can and adding a bit of an angle so that we're getting more shape and it doesn't just feel like a pool of lighting. Now, talking about lighting from above, Gabe actually had one of the Tilta suction cups. So I think it's called a Tilta Hydra electronic suction cup. I hate names of gear. I'm just gonna call it whatever I want. This electronic suction cup from Tilta, we stuck to the ceiling. We were able to add in one of our Pavo tubes above because when I was looking at the shot, we were getting daylight coming in from those windows on our face, but we wanted to accentuate it. We wanted to exaggerate it.
I think that every documentary filmmaker should have one of these suction cups in their kit because it allows you to rig a small light to any ceiling, no matter the room. And a big part of this scene too is we're trying to balance out like a very interior part of our kitchen's exposure to where we inevitably are going to get right next to a window. So by having an extension of our window light or this tube, we're able to shoot kind of a one-er shot where
without having to adjust aperture.
Yeah, and which is nice because especially if you're controlling in a doc setting for someone who might be doing an action that you can't predict everything and you give them a range of motion, like you can be in the kitchen, you can be in the living room. This is kind of like balancing you almost 360 from shooting everywhere.
So by adding that tube there, we are able to emulate the idea of that blue cool daylight coming onto her face with the warm tungsten on the back. And then we change all of the lighting from the app. It's really an exciting time to be doing lighting on independent small films right now, because even in this room right now, I have swapped out all the bulbs in my office for these Pavo 10C bulbs, and we actually had a full kit on set. So I think we had about 10 in the end, and we actually needed those because when we were down in that big, ugly conference room space, we wanted to swap out all those ugly fluorescent bulbs. And those fixtures were nice. We actually could end up using that fixture when we powered our lights to full power as one of our additional lighting sources. So I'll just jump into that next thing of hiding your lights in plain sight using practicals. I highly recommend grabbing a bunch of lamps. Every cinematographer or filmmaker should have a stack of lamps ready to go. Desk lamps, tall lamps, have them as part of your kit. Treat them like C-stands because they're so handy to put into a room. And then especially when you put your own bulbs into it, you can control it with your app, you can begin to create pools of light around the room and take what would be normally a boring corner and suddenly have a nice pool of light there. So we did that in everywhere. When we were back up in the condo, we swapped out all the bulbs out of all the fixtures. Now what's fun with those 10C light bulbs is although they don't have a battery inside, there is a little pack that you can have that will power it off USB-C, and then you can dial in your lighting that way. Those packs have a battery power, so it's external. So we used that when Elisha was sitting there on her laptop. We just needed a little more of a catch light on her face. And again, without having to bring a light onto set, we just threw one of those bulbs there on her laptop. We could have rigged something smaller had we had a little light pad like that, but in this case, we were just using the bulb. And there's actually one more really interesting feature with that bulb. I thought this was kind of cool. They have this little like flywheel, pinwheel here. You can stick this to the top, and now you have this in a fixture and you want to cut some of your lighting. You could put this in there and then use this little AS-B5C. That's the technical term for this. Or I call it a pinwheel. Now I'm Dutch. Now, quick rundown of all the lighting gear we used today. For our outside fixtures was the Nanlux 600C lighting. We also had a Nanlux 150C light. On the interiors, off and above, or for our main keyed source, we used the new Pavo Slim 360C. This is a light that I hadn't had the pleasure of using yet, and this was my first time on set using it. We also used some tubes, the Pavo Tube 230XR, and as well, for our bulbs on set, we were using the Pavo bulb, the 10C bulb. And for our camera, we had an Alexa. That was very fun. Nick happens to own one, our DP, who was working with us. And we were using the Arcana Dizio lenses because Nick hadn't tried those out yet, so he wanted to test those out. You see a little theme there. All of our gear in terms of lighting was provided by Nanlux and Nan Lighting, so I wanted to disclose that in this video that they did provide the gear we got to use on set. And I gotta shout out Nick Pilecki, our cinematographer on this. He's become a good friend and a great collaborator. We have our power grade that we've made together. Whenever I call him up and say, hey, do you wanna do a camera test? He's all in because we get to try new things and mess around and learn. And when we were doing this interview setup, which I'll do a separate video on that, there was a bunch of stuff that immediately we realized wasn't working, but then I got to sit there with him and discuss it and actually learn a new way of kind of setting up that interview space the way I hadn't thought before. These are the chance for you to have a calm mind, a calm set, and no pressure on deliverables, and mess around and try new things. Your favorite Hollywood cinematographer and directors spend months before they go into a feature film doing camera tests, and these are veterans of filmmaking. Just like an athlete takes so many shots in practice so that when they're in the game time, they're ready to go. Think about Air Bud. They practiced all the time. That dog was a champion so that they could win every game they played, and in fact, every sport that we end up seeing that dog and or ape play. Air Bud practices, so should you. By the way, if you like lighting guides, I threw a couple free resources down below. These are checklists and guides we have with full breakdowns, lighting plots, and step-by-step checklists for you to go through your lighting, whether it's small interviews or big ones. These are free resources that the Art of Documentary provides, so I have those down below if you want to have some extra knowledge for when you're going out there and hopefully doing camera tests. The next lighting technique to eliminate stands on your set, and this is the most common way you'll see people hiding lights, and it's not even necessarily really hiding, it's just emulating sunlight, and that's bringing your lights outside of your set on the other side of windows, punching them in through those windows and back into the set. There's just a few quick things I want to say about this that you have to watch out for. One is obviously your pole. This is again now going to be in your shot if you're not careful. We were shooting on anamorphics, so sometimes that helps because your background bokeh is so blurry, but there's still some times that we did catch it. Sometimes just had to hide those poles with foliage. Can look a bit goofy, but a person's eye may just see it as a bush. The bigger the light you have, the further you can put it away so it can be out of your shot and punch it back in. We had the Nanlux 600C light, and that was helpful, but we still had to have it somewhat close in because it was a giant room. But I love punching lights from outside of windows. It's just nice to have those pool of lights there, and you can break it up with what we call dingles, putting some foliage in front of that window. In the case of the condo, we didn't want to directly have it right onto Elisha. It's not all the time that you see in a house where light is just hitting someone directly in the face. You can see in my office, it's just ambiently pooling in. So sometimes you do want to have it just bounce into the room. In this case, we shot it off the ground because that is more common, the angle that a light would come.
This is something I do a lot of times in apartment buildings where you can't necessarily get a light outside the window because we're up on the 4th or 5th story, is if you get access to a balcony, what I'll do is I'll take the light and rather than point it directly at our subject, I'll kind of point it into the ground and let the passive light bouncing off the ground just lift the face 10 to 20%. So it feels a little more natural than if you took this, blasted it right at your subject directly and tried to diffuse it. There's always just like, there's this uncanny part where like, it still looks like you have a light out there. So this is just a way of like feathering it in and hiding more in plain sight.
And the sunlight isn't always at dusk unless you're shooting on a VR stage like all these mediocre Hollywood films these days. But you can put the light above and bounce it off of the floor and then up into your character's face like we did. So it becomes almost like that bounce that Gabe was using earlier. So in the condo, Nick had the idea of having a more aggressive angle with our 600C, which we put out on the patio just outside the door there. We had that bounce off the ground into Elisha's face, which was really great. One way to hide those lights outside the window as well is just letting the window blow out. This is normal. Our eyes sometimes will see windows just as big, white, bright squares. You remember when I had Stefano Ferrari on here talking about his Netflix cinematography, he often will just have a window blowout. So this is another way you can hide that light by just having it fully overexposed. But be careful too that you're not shooting directly into the light. Sometimes it feels like suddenly there's a sun right outside the window, which is weird. The sun isn't just gonna sit there 10 feet from your window. So you kind of have to play with it and begin to really ask yourself, does this feel realistic? Is there a way that we can shift it away? Can I sacrifice a perfect flare in order for the room to feel more realistic? It's kind of a push and pull that you want to have, and this is where I recommend doing camera tests and for you getting a feel of where you can place a light from an exterior window. As I mentioned, one of the other techniques you can do so you don't really have light stands on set is what we call Hollywooding or bouncing. This may seem quite obvious to you, but it's still a technique used on all the major movie sets. Having things like Gabe standing there with the 4x4 bounce just to get some extra catch light onto Elisha helped. And then Gabe, since he's handheld, he is now the human C-stand. He can walk around, pull that in, pull that out, and can listen to our DP saying, waste it away, bring it in, catch that light, oh, a little less. This is a way that you can get dynamic lighting on the fly. We even had Gabe when he had an actual painter's pole and had a clamp on the end of that with the Pavo tube. And we tried some stuff like that. It can sometimes work, kind of want to diffuse it, can start looking spotty, something you want to be careful with. That's why you'll see a lot of lighting techniques, people using these big long bamboo poles with China bulbs on the end. The China bulb is very soft and it has a lot of ambient light, so you're not casting big, deep, dark shadows. So having one of those around set sometimes can help, or you'll see people using spotlights. Like when we did this VR shoot, we had Adrian, our lighting technician, running around with handheld lights powered by V-mounts, getting us these spotlights. It's quite fun. You can get some dynamic shots and suddenly your light is acting like a camera, picking off people and shooting different areas. Well, I hope you enjoyed that. Shout out to Nanlite for providing all of our lighting gear in this video. Become a big fan of using their gear, and they've also just helped support us shoot so many videos. I don't know why I'm leaning away. I guess I just wanted to show the bulbs again. And thank you, Gabe, our gaffer, Kim, Elisha, Landon, Nick. Just fun people. Find some people you like and get out there and get practicing all your lighting. It's just those are some of my favorite days. The pressure's off and I know I'm gonna get to grow and learn as a filmmaker. Can't recommend it highly enough. Get into those resources down below. They're free resources. We put a lot of time in them to make sure that they're practical tips that you can follow immediately in your career and on set. I hate goodbyes, but I love stroopwafels. Yeah, they're good. The Dutch, you and your windmills, produce some tasty, thin, syrupy waffles. All right, have a good one. Goodbye.